Welcome to the original Gangsters Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Burnstein. We're going to go back up to Canada. More breaking news and more fallout from the arrest of Montreal Mafia underboss Pietro D'Adamo, a.k.a. Black Pete. Has been locked up for 2 months now on a gun case, and things have really started to fall apart after they had stabilized for about 3 months on the heels of D'Adamo and Montreal Mafia Don Leo Rizzuto uh, holding a peace conference with the Hells Angels, Marty Robert and his men, and putting an end to their 2-year plus shooting and firebombing war. Then we had 3 months of peace stabilization, let's say from the middle of December until the middle of March. Pete D'Adamo gets taken off the streets in March 20th. All hell breaks loose. And now it looks like his driver, Josh Silent J. Soroino, who was arrested with him in March at that traffic stop, will have to go back on trial for a murder that he beat 2 years ago. Got acquitted at a jury trial in 2023. The prosecutors have appealed that acquittal, and the higher court tossed the case. And Soroino has to go and face the charges again. Even though he was acquitted, double jeopardy does not apply, and there was faulty jury instructions. I'll get into that in a moment, but on a technicality, the murder of Eric DeSosa in the spring of 2019, that homicide case, the DeSosa homicide case, is back alive and active, and will be going for a second time in front of the jury with Soroino on the defendant's side of things. He's being charged. He's 31 years old. He's a driver and protege of Pete D'Adamo. Was driving the car when they were all pulled over on March 20th around the area of Nuns Island. I think going from one meeting to another, handling day-to-day business that D'Adamo handles for the Rizzutos. Soroino was his chauffeur, and based on a tip that there was a gun in the car, a narcotic squad pulled them over and arrested Soroino, D'Adamo, and West End gang Irish mobster Larry Cooney. Cooney and Soroino were bonded out. D'Adamo has been trying to fight his way out, but now it looks like he's going to be in there until his trial or until his case resolves itself. The Crown will not grant him bond, and I'm sure that this was a coordinated effort by the SQ and Team Canada, if you will, to remove a very valuable piece of the puzzle from the street and see if by doing that, by removing D'Adamo, which they've successfully done, and there's been chaos since. I think the more chaos, the more cases the SQ can build. So I don't think it was I think it was a very deliberate thing to find a way to get D'Adamo removed from the equation and then try to benefit from the ripple effects. And D'Adamo, we've talked about it here at OG Pod quite a bit in the last 6 months. D'Adamo went from a minor player, a side character, to his name's on the marquee now. He's right up there with Leo Rizzuto and the Solicitos, and he comes from the Solicito branch of the family, was mentored by the original Sauce Solicito and very close to Little Sauce. Took Little Sauce's spot as underboss when Little Sauce had to go deal with his health problems, and has just been instrumental in righting the ship for the Rizzutos. And a guy that is we talk about guys that check all the boxes, a tough guy, smart guy, popular guy, big earner. And that's what D'Adamo was known as. And he was integral. And now you remove him from the picture, the blow to the organization, that dent that momentum that the Crown is gaining only gets bigger. And for the Rizzutos, there's only more to clean up and more to try to salvage from the peace that was made. And the peace was, about 3 months of peace. And then issues with Tupac Atna and his Rat Pack mob, issues with this new Arabs with Attitude crew known as the AWA. They smelled blood in the water when Pete D'Adamo got locked up, and they immediately started coming at the Rizzutos. So it's coming from all angles. But Sorono's going to have to go face this case again. Let's talk about what exactly happened. On May 10th, 2019, at an Italian restaurant on the South Shore of Montreal called Sophia, in a shopping plaza known as Dick's 30, in a neighborhood, in the Broussard neighborhood. About 10:30 at night, a gunman makes his way through the Sophia restaurant into a kind of a back room where there was a bunch of televisions and a group of 10 to 15 people there doing a hockey playoff watch party. Eric DeSouza, 24 years old, was present, had his back turned to the door to the back room, was watching the game on the big screen television, and a gunman came up, put two in the back of his head, and fled. All the people in that room, and allegedly whoever the shooter was, were all participants, according to SQ, according to our sources, and according to court documents. Were all participants and co-conspirators in a big Rizzuto mob phone scam that had been running for a while, known as the Grandpa's Game or Grandparents Scheme. And, to break it down to its most simple form, this was just an extortion plot targeting old people. And there was a two-prong approach to the way that this scam, this extortion plot was being carried out. There was kind of the finesse angle, the silk glove angle, the kill 'em with kindness angle, where people would call up numbers that they would get. They would purchase, numbers in bulk, target retirees, elderly people. And the first way they would approach it would be they'd call this elderly couple up, and they would pretend to be a grandchild or a nephew or a niece or a cousin, and say that they were having financial difficulty or they were stuck in a different country or whatever, and get the victims to send cash over a banking app. There was a lot of immigrant elderly couples that were targeted intentionally because, naturalization and what your status is as a citizen kind of makes things murkier when you're dealing with police and whatnot. So very targeted, very deliberate. And then there was another more aggressive approach, which was basically calling these elderly couples up and through threats and intimidation, getting them to send money over banking apps. And we're told that there was a divide in this group. And this was a group of younger guys that were operating this phone scam allegedly under the umbrella of the Rizzutos, but more specifically the D'Adamo Solicito branch. And all younger guys. DeSouza was a part of that group. Allegedly, Sorono was a part of that group, whether or not he was the trigger man in this murder or not. And what we're told is that the higher-ups in the Montreal Mafia did not like the second prong approach. They did not like the more aggressive, pure extortion approach where you were calling up old people and basically threatening to hurt them unless they sent you money immediately. They thought there was more exposure on the law enforcement end of it. They wanted them to stick to the pretending that you're a relative and try to lovingly put your hand into the proverbial pocket. And DeSouza, according to our sources, was kind of a part of that group that was being more aggressive on the phone. Either way, it ends with DeSouza being murdered in cold blood in very public, brazen fashion. trials in 2023, Soroino beats the case based on the fact, primarily, according to this appeal and according to the appellate judge who reversed it, the acquittal was based on the fact that identifications in court of the triggerman was that the shooter had blonde hair. Soroino has dark hair and a dark beard, and because of the perceived misidentification of the shooter, Soroino walked. Now, it's legitimate law, and again, this is a technicality, but it's legitimate. I looked it up. It's a law that is both in the Canadian justice system as well as the United States justice system, that a verdict, whether it be acquittal or conviction, when it comes to an identification of an individual, cannot be based primarily on hair color, eye color, or hair length, or length of facial hair. Too easy to manipulate, too easy to change. Just because Soroino had dark hair and a beard at trial doesn't mean he didn't, dye his hair blonde for the hit. That's the theory. So because the judge did not properly instruct the jury that they could not acquit or convict based solely on that identification, the case is going back in front of another jury. Now, working for the prosecution and against Soroino in the defense is that the prosecution has physical evidence. They have fingerprints and DNA left at the scene on a green plastic bag that, according to prosecutors, was used by the shooter to carry the gun into the establishment, and the gun was removed from the green plastic bag, or the green plastic bag was on the muzzle of the gun when it was shot, when Dos Sosa was gunned down. That green plastic bag was left at the scene, and fingerprints and DNA of Soroino's were found on that green plastic bag. Just putting on my defense lawyer hat, you could argue that he's not charged with being a conspirator in the murder. He's not charged with being involved in some premeditated, this guy hands something to this guy, who hands something to this guy, and we all plan something together to kill an individual. He's just charged with being the trigger man. You could argue that, he possibly was involved in the conspiracy. He's not being charged with the conspiracy. You could say, he was involved possibly in a conspiracy, possibly his fingerprints, his DNA made its way onto the bag that would hold the gun that was then given to the shooter, which would explain his, traces of his DNA and fingerprints being on the bag. He's not charged with being a conspirator. He's charged with being the trigger man. So I don't know how that actually works. You'd be admitting to taking part in a murder, but if he's charged with the murder and then he's legitimately acquitted of the murder, they can't come back and charge again. So there's a slippery slope there, but I believe there are ways to argue away your fingerprints and DNA being found at the crime scene, especially if you have a number of witnesses getting up on the stand saying the guy who shot De Sosa had blonde hair, and everybody that's ever seen Soroino, he's never had blonde hair. Now, I'm not saying that it's not possible that he didn't dye his hair for that homicide, but he's a guy that, throughout his whole life has always had dark hair. And he's also a guy with a very low-key demeanor. They call him Silent J for a reason, doesn't talk much. And this was a very high-key MO in terms of carrying out the homicide. So that doesn't mean that somebody that acts a certain way can't also act another way, but this doesn't always line up with the way that, at least I'm told, that Soroino conducts himself and how he's kind of put together. He's mentored by Pete D'Adamo, who's very slick and savvy. So I would guess that he's slick and savvy. but he's going to have to go back in front of a jury and deal with this case again. And the hits just keep on coming for the Rizzutos. Pete D'Adamo getting pulled off the street has had a lot of ramifications, and the ripple effects keep on rippling. And that's why we're here. Sorono doesn't have to stay locked up the way that Pete D'Adamo does on the gun case, but he's got a much larger trajectory in terms of what he could end up in prison for. I mean, even if D'Adamo gets convicted of this gun case, it's only a year or two. But if Sorono, who is out on bond, if he gets convicted in the second DeSosa murder trial, that could be life in prison. So right now, D'Adamo's inside, Silent J, Josh Sorono is outside. They could be changing places, though. We never know. We'll keep you updated with everything that's going on in Montreal, the Rizzuto mob family, the Hells Angels, everything that's going on the street. We've got our fingers on the pulse. We've got moles all over Quebec feeding us information from guys on the street as well as guys in the SQ and the RCMP. So please like, share, and subscribe. Original Gangsters Podcast. We're here 24/7, breaking down the underworld, one city, one region, one country at a time. I'll see you guys next time.